Winners and losers from the draft, some of the picks that stood out, and, of course, John Clayton from the Washington Post is here with us to discuss, as promised, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. This hour, don't forget, in about 20 minutes, football at 4, Jeff Mosher is in the house. We'll look at the Eagles a little closer at their entire draft class. Jeff Kerr tonight from CBS as well. But right now, John Clayton takes a look back at the winners and losers from the weekend. I thought it was an interesting week. Of course, there were so many questions, John, about what was going to happen at the top of the draft. And I guess, really, we talked the last time that you were on about the quarterbacks and where they might go. But I guess the draft really took a wild turn when the two corners went back-to-back at pick number 8 and pick number 9 with Carolina and Denver. That really changed a lot of the draft.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, certainly it was going to be debatable what was going to happen with Atlanta at number 4. I didn't think they were going to take a quarterback. They didn't take a quarterback. And once that happened, you knew one of the quarterbacks was going to fall down. A little bit of a curveball with San Francisco, but apparently they liked Trey Lane from the beginning. That was the smartest quarterback. But no, you're right, because Carolina, they end up getting the cornerback, and I thought that was interesting because I think most people had Patrick Surtain over J.C. Horn, but nevertheless, it ended up going that J.C. Horn ended up being number 1, and then of course what you had was the surprise of Patrick Surtain ended up going over and getting a choice over Justin Fields, but that was, I think, a little predictable because here you had the Teddy Bridgewater deal, and it gave them ability to take the best guy on the board and then try to help out the defense.
Yeah, were the Denver fans a little surprised that when Fields was there, that wasn't their pick?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I do like 3 hits a week on the Denver station, the fan in Denver, and some of the hosts are ripping the team for not taking Fields, but you know how that is in South Jersey and Philadelphia. The fans and some of the hosts are going to take a negative stand, and some people downgraded what they did in the draft because of that. But in the end, I think they came out of it fine because they got Patrick Surtain. Then they tried to trade up to get Jalen Phillips, the defensive end, to give more help to Vic Fangio to try to have him keep his job on defense as the head coach. And so that didn't work out, but I thought they got a good player in Javonte Williams in the second round. And then they got 2 rising guys in the third round that were considered 2 of the better young guys. So I think overall they came out of it well.
Overall, I mean, and then, okay, here's something I'd like to try to pick your brain on a little, John. Philadelphia is at 12. They move up to 10. Do you think that if they stayed at 12, the Giants take Smith and the Bears call Philly and offer them the same deal?
Yeah, because I think what ended up happening, and this goes back to what your point about Carolina, because Carolina kind of shook things up by taking the cornerback over an offensive lineman, and of course that did cause a lot of juggling. But I think that Howie Roseman was trying to trade up with Carolina to make sure he could get Patrick Surtain at cornerback. But when that didn't happen, then you come back and it's like, okay, let's jump and make sure we get Devonta Smith and get him as the choice. Because now what's interesting that the Dallas Cowboys endorsed this trade because here it is. They wanted Patrick Surtain. They didn't get the cornerback. And now, even though they took 6 players, the first 6 players were on defense, now they have to find a cornerback that twice a year has to cover Devonta Smith, who's going to be one of the most elusive guys in the league.
Yeah, that was as big a surprise for me, too, was that the 2 NFC East teams decide to make a deal here and then make the swap. And obviously, Philly goes up and gets Devonta Smith. The Giants trade out of that spot. They go back and take Tony. And, of course, Dallas goes with Micah Parsons there. So, overall, on when you look at the landscape, who are some of the teams that you gave high marks to? Who are some of your winners?
I gave high marks, the best marks, to the New York Jets because they come out and they got 4 really good players on offense. Certainly, I like what they did a lot because they were aggressive. They needed some help on offense because they've been so starved. It's one of the reasons Sam Darnold's not there because they had so little talent. But certainly, I thought Zach Wilson, we all knew was going to go there. Elijah Vera Tucker, they traded up for, so that gives them some power on the offensive line. And then I love the fact that they got Elijah Moore in the second round because I think he was close to being a first-round wide receiver, and they just kept on drafting Michael Carter's. I thought they got a good pick in Michael Carter in the fourth round, the running back, and then they come back and they take Michael Carter, the cornerback, in the fifth round. So I thought that it was a real good draft for them. I give good marks to the New England Patriots because they were lucky enough to get Mac Jones and two offensive linemen. So I gave them real good reviews. And overall, I think that it was Carolina did a decent job. I mean, that's the one thing is like, sometimes I hate doing like I have to do the winners and losers because, like, for example, Baltimore had a decent draft, but they didn't totally address all their needs. Now they can maybe get lucky today with what's going to happen because what happened was that they lost two edge rushers in Unique Ngakoue and Matthew Judon, and they only were able to get one edge rusher at least early, and they didn't get the right tackle. But they can maybe sign Alejandro Villanueva here because now it's not going to cost them a compensatory pick, and then if not, Charles Leno from the Chicago Bears got cut, and they can look at getting him at right tackle.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, kind of agree with the Jets stuff there and some of the moves that were made. Now, obviously, as you said, it's tough to kind of pick these out. But because like Philadelphia, for instance, they take the offensive lineman in round 2, and the fans are saying you needed a corner. But Roseman was very clear when he came out and said, we didn't want to draft for need. We went with the best player available. So when you look at some of the teams that you're scratching your head here on this Monday, who are they?
I scratch my head at the Raiders because, I mean, something we're doing a lot of anymore because what you look at is that I had Alex Leatherwood going at the bottom of the first round to Kansas City before the Orlando Brown trade. I think most people had him either in the low first, high second. They take him 17th. Now, then they get lucky, and they were able to get Trevon Moehrig, the best safety in the draft, in the second round. But then they come back a couple rounds later and take back-to-back safeties. I mean, what are you doing? It's like I thought that was strange. Certainly Houston was a mess because, here it was, they have to go ahead and, take a quarterback because of the situation with Deshaun Watson. So they didn't get their first real pick on a guy that's going to play necessarily until the 87th pick, and they only had 5 draft choices. And they're going to be one of the worst teams in football. So you just shake your head about that one. Didn't think that was good. Again, Baltimore probably they weren't a loser, but they didn't. I don't think they won. So I didn't think that was very good.
I'd like to, and one of the teams, John, you're very close with is Seattle as well. They only had 3 picks in this draft, and that's a team that obviously had their own issues with the quarterback situation out there. It looks like that's been somewhat resolved with Russell Wilson, but 3 picks. How about what they did?
Again, they didn't like this draft. Simple as that. And so what they did, and this started last year, is that they started the maneuvering. Because, again, if you look at they're going to get the worst grade because they only had 3 picks, a 2, 4, and a 6. But when you look at the draft overall, I mean, their first and third round pick was Jamal Adams, a Pro Bowl safety, one of the best safeties in the league, with 9.5 sacks last year. Then in the fifth round, they got an $11 million guard from the Las Vegas Raiders when they got Gabe Jackson in the trade. And then in the 7th round, they got Carlos Dunlap, a former Pro Bowler, who came to this team and ignited the pass rush. So in the end, it's like you can say, yeah, they got 3, and they filled their needs because they were looking for a cornerback, they were looking for a wide receiver, and they were looking for a young tackle to develop. But overall, you look at the draft and you say, no, wait a second, only 3 draft choices, but you also got 2 guys who have been to the Pro Bowl and another guy who could have been a Pro Bowl guard.
We're talking with John Clayton from the Washington Post, at John Clayton NFL, for all of his NFL coverage, the best picks, the biggest question marks, his winners and losers. John, what is going to happen in Green Bay with this Aaron Rodgers situation?
Well, let's go into history, because if you go back in history, the agent for Carson Palmer was David Dunn. And so Carson Palmer was so sick of losing in Cincinnati and didn't trust the organization to be able to go out and get players to win, that he basically, said he was retiring and he's not going back. And eventually he lost money, but he ended up being traded to the Oakland Raiders. All right. Guess who represents Aaron Rodgers? David Dunn. So I think you can see there's going to be the plan probably do the same thing. It's like, hey, if you're keeping me a Packer, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to retire, because then you have to give back signing bonus money and stuff like that. But also what gives him a little bit of an edge is that they've already given him a $6.8 million roster bonus. So if he has to lose $6.8 million to lose his point, he can do that. And then he's still making a lot of money. So I think you can see that I think the chances of him being there aren't good. And he can't be traded before June 1st because it'd be a $38 million cap hit.
Wow.
And that's not going to be good. And so if they trade him after June 1st, or maybe even during the season, it will be a $19 million hit this year. And, and of course, some of that's going to be minimized if they don't have to pay him because he doesn't show up. So I think that you can see that this situation is so bad that the Packers are a mess. And then to make matters worse, they wait to the third round to get a wide receiver. I mean, it just makes Aaron Rodgers even more angry.
Yeah, at this point the whole thing with Watson down in Houston, he wanted to be traded. He had some problems that have now come out that story has kind of been pushed under the rug. And people thought, I don't know if they'll trade him. It was this whole thing. Hey, you're mad in February. Let's see if you're still mad come training camp. Is this starting to feel that Aaron Rodgers will not be the quarterback of the Packers?
At the start of the season, yeah. I mean, he'll have to make a decision by midseason if he wants to get credit for the year. But I'd say now, because the problem facing the Packers and even Aaron Rodgers is how many teams are going to be looking for a high-priced quarterback like that. Because right now, with 5 quarterbacks being taken in the first round, 8 in the first 3 rounds, the other quarterback moves with the 6 guys that have been moved to different teams with taking big salary cap hits. I mean, there's not a lot of teams looking. So basically what you're looking at is probably the Denver Broncos and very few others. Because the Denver Broncos, they got Teddy Bridgewater, they've got Drew Lock, but and they didn't get Justin Fields.
Yep.
So I mean, they're the ones that can sit there and wait. They can wait for Deshaun Watson. They can wait for Aaron Rodgers, and you can see George Payton how aggressive he is. He's willing to do things and be aggressive because again, they had a great draft. I think a very good offseason, and I think they're going to be a pretty good team.
Who plays quarterback in Denver?
I think it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater because when you look at the numbers, Drew Lock, according to Pro Football Focus, was one of the worst 5 quarterbacks in the league last year. He regressed so bad because they had to even ease up the playbook because he wasn't executing what was in the playbook. His completion percentage went into the high 50s. He ended up throwing 15 interceptions, tied for the league lead. And you look at Teddy, and also only threw for like 6.6 yards per attempt. And that's 6.4 is kind of the cutoff for being a really bad quarterback because you're not getting the ball downfield. You look at Bridgewater; he doesn't throw many interceptions. He he gets 7.3 yards an attempt. He completes in his career over 66% of his passes. And George Payton knows him from when they drafted him with the Minnesota Vikings. And so I think that right now it's an open competition, but I think that Bridgewater is going to beat out Drew Lock.
I'll leave you with this. John Clayton, by the way, it's been a pleasure to get to talk so much football with you this year. Zach Ertz was not traded. Surprised?
It's still early. I mean, I think you notice this is one of the few drafts where there was not, during the 3 days, a veteran traded in the draft, not one.
Yeah.
And so, so you can see, and particularly too, with about 7 teams that have to get under the cap a little bit more to sign the draft choices. I think what everybody's looking at right now is like, okay, let's get through the draft and we'll look at some things later. So I still think he'll get traded, but now it's going to be for a pick in 2022.
All right, which is probably a much more in exact science, a more scientific draft. John Clayton, Washington Post, here on the Sports Bash. John, always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
At John Clayton NFL.